but he was grandiose in the 80s. That was part of his brand, and it worked really well for what he was doing.
The Donald.
Did he really go by the?
Yeah, the Donald.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny for a
The
real.
New York Post infamously ran one time, Ivana Better Deal, referring to his wife in the divorce settlement.
That's a pretty clever headline.
The whole thing was clever.
Yeah, I mean, I like when people get in the news. Now, what was scary about that is it seemed like the clown was kind of running the train station for a while, and regardless of what my personal feelings are, like it was very fun to watch for a while.
It was tremendously fun, and by the way, good for you for bringing in the train station, which was one of his earliest projects that launched his career.
I didn't know that. That's because I got lucky.
Yeah, you got lucky. It initially separated him from his father.
Because he built the train station, or he built condos around the train station?
Because he refurbished the train station.
I think I remember reading that in an article or a book, or maybe did you see the Wall Street Journal about how he avoided taxes 20 years? They literally outlined how I can avoid taxes to my kids. It was very detailed.
It's a good idea.
I was like, Dad, read this.
You should.
'Cause you're going to die soon.
Alternatively, you can listen to Steve Martin some years ago talk about the two-step process to make $1 million without paying taxes. Step 1, make $1 million. Step 2, when the IRS comes around your house, you say, "I forgot." That was the sum total.
Yeah. That's like Steve Martin.
So probably the Wall Street Journal is a better analysis.
I didn't introduce you. I'm a very, very bad host. You're so engaging that I forgot it was Mike DeMott. And I feel
Ter Maat,
like
with a T. Ter Maat.
But I feel like
I've already failed my first handwriting test.
But the Ter Maat is sort of reads like a termite, and I didn't want to say that.
No, that's okay.
Secondly, since I'm American, it seems like there's some kind of European thing going on in your name, like a Van Damme or something.
Yes, it does seem like that.
It just kind of confused me.
It is confusing.
So can you pronounce it correctly so that I can properly edify you?
Ter Maat.
Mike Ter Maat.
As though it were M-O-T-T. Which it's not, of course. But if you pretended that it were M-O-T-T.
Do you think that's going to be a problem having Americans remember your name if they can't pronounce it? Can we just change it to Butch?
I had a thought on this earlier, but I frankly can't remember. No, I don't think it's going to be a problem.
They're like,
I think for starters, the Mike is enough for most people.
That's pretty American. Like, yo, Mike.
Mike is pretty American, and there haven't been presidents named Mike.
You sure?
No, I'm not. But I can't think of any. Let me go through the list. Mike Washington, no. Mike Lincoln, no. I think we're good.
So here's why I want you to be president, because you're the first president to ever be on my show. I mean, A, it's a new show, but B, I like you.
I appreciate that, which is why you're interviewing all of the candidates to give yourself the best shot possible.
I mean, I would, but I probably won't at this particular event. So for me, you're my new favorite candidate.
I'll put in a good word.
Because you said things nice about me.
I appreciate that.
And we'll get a photograph.
That was misinterpreted, by the way. I will put in a good word for you with Joe Biden.
But he's already president. I guess that would be okay.
I'm going to get you an interview with him. He will be reelected, and then you will have been known as the guy that had the last living interview with Joe Biden.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That would be cool, actually.
Can you guarantee he dies immediately after, so I am the last interview?
I guarantee that he will die soon.
You know what? If we say that,
we may have to stretch the definition of soon.
We might have guns at our head if that joke goes because I think you might have just threatened the.
By the way, have we started the interview yet?
Yeah, we start before you know you started.
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from my girlfriine. Have we started?
Yes.
Like, yeah, I've started.
Yeah,
Did you finish? She's like, no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It like this.
All right. How much time are we going to allocate to this?
Especially, I mean, we got 20 minutes or so. I mean, 10. I mean, you are interesting. You're running for president. You are. I also want to look at your handwriting to make sure you're not crazy, and you're not. It's funny. I'm the guy that always analyzes the candidates in the Wall Street Journal and stuff. I'm the handwriting expert.
Sure.
And so I might as well do it now to your face than they run it with
instead
of
stabbing you in the back 6 months later.
Yeah, but I always say really cool stuff, and then they take pieces from what I told the reporter.
It's going to be a stretch in my case.
And they sprinkle it with other handwriting experts, and then it looks like a hatchet job. And I never do that. I always be.
I understand. Your credibility is at risk here. If you say something interesting about me, I'll know that you made it up.
I will say this. The T's in your last name, Maat, or Ter Maat, as you want to say it, is literally the definition of what my teacher told me when I was 14 if I want to be rich. You make your T-bar high. You make this angle there, which means persistence. So persistence, finish what you start, high self-esteem, ambition.
I understand.
Those are literally what that one letter means.
So
And
it could mean other things besides wanting to be rich. It could just be a different type of ambition.
Correct. It has nothing to do with money per se, but
Mm-hmm.
as far as like as a kid, I'm like, I want to be successful.
I want to run for president of the United States as a libertarian.
Well, that's super ambitious or misdirected, depending on what you think of the Libertarian Party.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's a fine line.
But the fact is that you believe you can win this, or you
Mhm.
believe that, is really
Mhm.
cool.
What's really weird is that the couple of people in the hallway right now believe it too.
I think you're going to do better than you think. I mean, it's a stretch to win from any third party, but back to being serious, like the fact is that you have a belief in yourself. What'd you do before politics? I mean, okay, so let me just do the quick rundown. Analytical, emotional, expressive, a little sensitive. You're a good speaker. You definitely could speak, write books. You could do all the speaking stuff, but not political sleazy. Writing like I'm a comedian. I've done radio for 25 years. There's a certain loquaciousness that I have,
Mhm.
which other radio show have, other
Yep,
writers
yep,
have. You
yep,
have that.
Yep.
So were you a writer? Did you ever write books or
No, but I was a police officer.
I wouldn't have seen that.
That's very similar, I think.
I don't think it's similar at all.
No, I guess you're right.
Were you a cop?
Yeah, I was a cop for 11 and a half years in
What city?
Broward County.
New York.
Broward County between Fort Lauderdale and Miami.
A Florida cop.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Florida. There's so much to say about Florida.
There is a lot to say about Florida,
Like
especially how good it
alligators.
is to leave. I moved out of Florida a year and a half
I mean,
ago.
as a Florida cop,
Mhm.
how many meth head morons having sex with alligators did you have to arrest?
7. Do you want their names? I can tell you their birthdays.
I read that. So here's the thing. I read that in the paper and I thought, this has got to be a fake article. But what I saw was a sign that says, do not fornicate with the crocodiles. Is it crocodiles, alligators?
Oh, well, it depends. In
it's-
South Florida, we actually have both. It's the only place in the world where they coexist.
So the sign said, federal law,
Yep.
state law, do not fornicate. And I
Mhm.
thought to myself, in order for that law to be made and the
Someone
sign
had
to be
to have done
printed,
it.
and I thought this is a joke.
Right.
But you're a cop. Is that a
Mhm.
joke?
No, being a cop is not a joke. It's a very important job.
That's a nice term.
Communities, Bart, communities have a right to come together and decide what kind of criminal code that they want to live by and how they want that to be enforced.
You so didn't answer my question. Do you think that ever really happened? Or is that just a joke? Did I just get it in my feed and I'm like, no, this can't
I
happen?
believe it is probably a joke, only for the following reason. I don't believe the legislature in Tallahassee would have risked the debate that would have had to have gone into.
On the record.
Exactly.
So it may have been a local law, but even that city council, right?
Well, imagine the city council takes it up, and at one point, councilman number 2 says, Bob, I've actually seen you do that. So why is it you're trying to move a city ordinance against it?
it's
just not a
it's
debate.
comic gold, though.
It's comic gold. It's not the kind of thing that you want to take up as a legislator. I'm pretty sure for this reason that it's a joke.
That's fantastic to know. So can I still make fun of Florida in general, just not meth crack hat addicts, crocodile molesters? It was
I believe so.
no molestar crocodile is what it was. It was no molestar crocodile. It was in Spanish, which was kind of offensive to me.
Okay. At this point, I need to warn you that I actually know 115 words in Spanish.
You know 115 words?
Yes, 115 words in
Solamente.
Spanish.
No más?
No más. Importantly, one of the words I'm familiar with is this molestar. Okay? It doesn't actually mean what you think it means. What it means is don't bother the reptiles. Okay, now it's interesting, speaking of analyzing each other's idiosyncratic behaviors, now that you've been through my handwriting,
You
I
said
must
idiot,
say,
idiot, base word idiot. Thank you.
I must say that it does reveal something about your particular personality that you would read that word in Spanish without knowing what it meant and immediately jump to the conclusion that it had something to do with fornication.
It says molestar. I mean, my Spanish is limited.
Apparently.
I
You
mean-
must know 114 words or fewer in Spanish.
Well, I only got through level 3. I was 19.
Mhm.
I was in Madrid, and you have to say it that way, otherwise you're
Run out on a rail as a gringo.
Madrid.
I pronounced it worse than that in Madrid myself.
But if I'm in Mexico City, I just sound happy.
If you were in
Madrid.
Mexico City and said anything about Madrid, you would be
Madrid.
run out on a rail.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise it.
Where's the?
Nor would I advise you talking about molesting the alligators and thinking you were
It's
actually
not
telling-
molesting. It's bothering.
Exactly.
Where'd you-
And this could well be a city ordinance.
It could be because
Yeah.
you shouldn't bother the elevator.
Right.
You shouldn't bother them.
What they don't want is for you to go up to them, tease them, attempt to feed them,
Correct.
throw things at them because they might get pissed and come at you. And now you got to call 911 and public resources are put to use, and the firemen, they need to continue their barbecue and watching TV.
So perhaps the sign was in English, but it was posted in Spanish.
No,
that's where I erred.
I think that the English part had been worn off, and you only read the Spanish part. Maybe the other side of the sign was in English, for example. And
it was on the internet. I just think my head around the internet, looked to the other side. Obviously, I tried.
It was on the internet.
It's got to be true.
Well, yes, you're right about that. But the problem with the internet is that certain things are sometimes omitted.
Okay.
Yeah, so they may have given you the Spanish version because it was posted by someone who didn't know what the word meant.
And obviously read by someone
exactly.
who doesn't
so
know what
the
the
two of you are
word meant.
simpatico, and you both think that there's a legislature somewhere that would take this up and move an ordinance against it.
Muy bien, señor. Muy bien. Muy inteligente.
Exactly.
Your handwriting wise, you're really brilliant. Let's talk about your belief system. So
you're obviously not very good at this. Let's move along.
You might be the funniest politician ever since Trump. I'm telling you. And he was, borderline. But you're intelligent.
He was borderline.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for a guy who can find the gumption to say, I could probably go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone without losing a tremendous amount of support. I think it really takes some guts to be able to say something like that in public.
Or the level of arrogance not seen before in public office.
And I think that those can both be true. By the way, I also think it could be true that he probably could have gone out on Fifth Avenue and shot someone without losing a great deal of support. Probably.
But there's a sort of fulfilling prophecy when you've been wealthy for 30 or 40 years, when you've got away with something, when you have a trust fund. You've seen this as people just get away. Small town America especially. If you're the son of the mayor and you constantly get bailed out and you keep getting in trouble, get bailed out, by the time you're 40 years old, everyone in town knows not to mess with you.
You certainly feel like you can do no wrong, and that does feed into a lot of other things that Donald Trump has said about himself.
And by the way, this this is not a Donald Trump bashing. We're both sort of like borderline respecting and observing, kind of in an analytical way.
Well, I understand that, but you've tripped into something here that I find a lot more interesting than talking about me. The idea that a guy could go around saying this is how you grab women, and that guy could be elected to office in the United States, I find deeply disturbing. By the way, it doesn't really bother me that he's been indicted and being prosecuted for some weird things that I don't think are nearly as important as a lot of other stupid things. Right? One thing that I don't think has gotten a tremendous amount of attention, but does bother me quite a bit, and I want to know whether you think that this reflects poorly on my character. He was recently found liable in a civil court for a sexual assault.
Okay.
I find that deeply, profoundly disturbing on a really moral, ethical level, like personal. Like if there was someone in your family who came home and said, gee, Uncle Bart, I was recently found guilty of mismanaging a bunch of documents in the garage. I think you would say something along the lines of, well, that was stupid.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not surprised you would do something that dumb.
Because you're kind of an airhead.
Because you're kind of an airhead, and you know that was irresponsible. Pay your fine, spend your 30 days pulling paper clips out of the walls or whatever the punishment is, and I'll see you in a month. Whereas if someone in your family comes and says, I was found responsible for a sexual assault, I think that's got to be a conversation stopper at the Thanksgiving table.
It's going to be a problem.
It's going to be a problem.
And then I have to wonder if it's okay if my niece and my nephew are around that person. And then again, I need to know more about the case. I do a lot of legal work, so I want to make sure that it wasn't railroaded. There wasn't. There's other factors.
There are other factors, and it's really interesting that the first thing you said about it was, now I got to be worried about other members of my family around this person. And I find that fascinating because that's exactly what we're talking about, is giving this man more responsibility.
Right.
Around whom we wouldn't necessarily trust him with our sister, right?
Necessarily. But I'm the one who would go and investigate the issues. But even still, that is a much more concern than the paperwork.
I think so.
But as you know, even with Bill Clinton, it was never about the cigar. It's about whoever's in power. We want him out of power. We want to replace him. It's a character assassination, which is his, which is the issue that people, if not in power, they want to assassinate the character.
Agreed.
Yeah, so character assassination is the play when you're not in office.
I would totally agree with that, although I do think that some politicians make it easier for that to happen than
That's
others.
True. It's because they can't
Bill Clinton was a material generator, as people might say, in your line of work.
if Bill Clinton was near the alligators, we'd have a problem.
Whereas, on the other hand, my boss's 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 boss in 1990, 91, 92, George Herbert Walker Bush, was very difficult to character assassinate in the sense that everyone recognized he was a good guy.
George
Herbert
the older
Walker
Bush, the
yeah.
older Bush.
Right.
He's just a decent guy.
Yeah, he was a decent guy.
He didn't cheat on his wife. He didn't do this.
Right. I think everyone recognized that he meant well.
Yeah.
You know, he could be kind of dope, and he wasn't nearly as fiscally conservative as he asserted,
Right.
and so he, in that sense, he was a great disappointment.
What's the current biggest issues that you would handle? Because I actually do like you. I hope you do.
I appreciate
make a run for this job and to be president.
I'm going to.
How would you make a difference considering what you've seen in the last 8, 10, 20 years? Because we have a lot of international listeners, and they look to us and they're like, hey, what's wrong with America?
Well, I agree with that. I think that we've gone off the rails government-wise in a couple of important ways, and that overlaps with some things that have gone sideways on us culturally. And I think that one of the most fundamental things that we can do is separate those two problems. I think that we have too many people in the United States that believe that they can affect our culture through either the criminal code or some other type of public policy application. And that's nuts. First of all, just an empirical matter, it's nuts. But attempting to do so is what creates black markets.
Oh, wow.
And you can fill in the blank in any sense of application. You look at our immigration catastrophe. We have tried to make something illegal without dedicating the resources to either stop it or recognizing the fact that culturally, neither the culture on our side of the border or the culture on the other side of the border is ready to shut this down. And so we have a black market in human trafficking. We have black markets in drugs coming across the border, and that's what makes it so dangerous. And the same thing can be said, for example, with the war on drugs. We have a culture that's not ready to give up drugs. We're trying to affect that with the criminal code, and it doesn't work like that.
But all it's done is filling up prisons and making private prisons rich.
That is
and
exactly
there's people
right.
that did caught with marijuana 20 years ago that are still in, and they're not going to let them out because the entire city is run with that. And yet now in half the states, anyone can smoke marijuana, and everybody's like, yeah, it's cool. Nobody cares anymore.
That is well said. The whole thing is just completely dopey on its face. So what really makes the drug situation in the United States so dangerous is it is a black market, that we've driven it all underground, and people can't avail themselves of whatever medical resources would actually make a difference, nor have we created the medical resources that would really make a difference.
But now you're seeing people dying.
Now we
from
see
street
people
drugs.
dying.
In the 80s, it was just one big Wall Street party. Now people are literally dying because they can't get the things that they now want because the supply and demand is so off.
And because we have a fentanyl problem, which is driven by a fraud problem in the sense that you cannot trust from whom you buy this stuff. You cannot trust where it is, where it isn't, how much of it is, and how much of it isn't in the product that you acquired. All of this is because it's a black market.
Wow, it's interesting. So that's a big thing. I ask you for four
That
things.
is a big thing.
Can you think of one other thing that would make a difference as far as you being president compared to whoever else could get elected?
One of the things that I think is really important for a libertarian to talk about, and we talk about this all the time, in addition to criminal justice reform, being a former cop, as you might imagine, I spend a lot of time and energy talking about that. But one of the things I think that as a Libertarian Party representative, we need to talk about loud and hard is the fact that the American public is ready to hear a much more robust anti-war message than they've ever been served up in recent history. And the reason I believe that is, number one, as an ethical proposition, I think more Americans are coming around to the idea that they are represented by a foreign policy that does not reflect their values, that is not aligned with their own personal ethics, their own personal morals. The idea of spending enough money on the Department of Defense for us to be able to win a war against the rest of the world combined is probably setting the bar too high in terms of the projection of military power. But the other thing that I think has changed in the last generation is that Americans are waking up to the idea that to be honest, and a lot of Americans are not going to hear this, but I'm on your show, so I might as well say it because it's the truth. We're not good at this. At a tactical level, we seem to be fantastic. We're good at killing people and blowing things up. We're good at moving material, taking land, holding land. We're good at opening seaways, holding seaways. We're even good at toppling governments, if you don't mind the secrets coming out in the long run.
It seems to be the narrative. Yeah.
Right. So we're good at all those at a tactical level. On a strategic level, in terms of achieving things that the American public would point to and say, that was a good idea, we're just not there. We just don't do that. There aren't examples in recent history where the Defense Department has imposed itself on another country, and notwithstanding the billions of dollars lost and the thousands of lives lost, or in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands of lives and trillions of dollars, there aren't examples where the American public would point to these things and say, that was a good idea. That's just not the case anymore.
It's just a shit show with a lot of wives with soldiers coming home in bags.
And I think that for this reason, I think you just put your finger on it, for this reason, people are ready to hear a message that says, you can be patriotic and still recognize that we stink at the idea of using military intervention as a foreign policy to achieve long-term strategic objectives in the interest of the American public.
It would have worked well in 1972 when we were sick of Vietnam. Do you think they're ready to hear it now since there's not bodies coming back every day?
I believe so. I also believe that it is increasingly important. I think that we have conflicts on the horizon which could be of horrific proportion.
Yeah.
I think that if we don't exit ourselves from NATO, we could be in a world of hurt in the next generation. I think that if we don't straighten out this silly idea of strategic ambiguity toward China, we're in a world of hurt in the next generation. I don't think there is such a thing as a relationship in the world that is advanced, that is made better and stronger by some sort of ambiguity. Try that with your spouse next week.
Or your 5-year-old.
Or your 5-year-old, by the way.
Sometimes you can.
Sometimes you can. It depends on whether your mother says so or I say so. That doesn't work. Speaking of civil wars, that doesn't work. And the American public needs to be told the truth, that we've been pursuing a policy that has absolutely contributed to the conflict and the war in Ukraine, that has contributed to the possibility of having a war over Taiwan.
I know that. I've been to Taiwan. I gave a speech there, and it's a lovely country, and they don't feel like they're Chinese, and they do like the Japanese. They're very split. Like it's not a Chinese. It's split, and then I feel for people because I know people. I also know people in China. So as an individual that's traveled there, it's a sad point for me because I'm like, man, please don't invade that,
right?
Because it's going to get us in all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
Mike, I love you, man. Mike Ter Maat. TerMaat. Did I get that right?
You did get it right, which is going to make it a lot easier for people to find the website, which is MikeTerMaat.com.
Yeah, that's what I want them to go to. And can they get to your email list, subscribe?
Yeah, you can get to everything there. You can actually find my real contact information, too, if you want to drop me a text and engage in a real
I feel privileged to have sat down, 1 foot from you, but they can actually chat with you, and that's not normal in politics.
Indeed, if someone feels like texting me, I'll call them back. We can have a conversation, and we can talk about you.
You don't need to talk about me.
No, I think that's the first thing that I would suggest that we talk about.
They're going to ask.
They're going to ask. Is he really like that?
No, they're going to say, is he really as good looking in person as I think he
is? Does he look like that? Does he really wear a blue plaid, for example, with a blue striped shirt?
Is this bad?
No. I think you look fantastic, but people are going to ask.
Am I going to get a ticket from the fashion police, Florida cop, alligator chaser?
If I were still a police officer, I'd find some excuse to give you a ticket just on general principle.
Mike Ter Maat, everybody.